contribute to practice and make a difference through the work we do, albeit from the standpoint of an academic institution. And we want to do that through research on the role of technology, innovation, and the private sector in refugee protection. But we want that research to be applied, to have a real-time focus, to contribute to evaluations, and improve the innovation process. We've got two basic goals, a sort of larger goal and a sub-goal as a project. The overarching goal is to help develop a methodology for bottom-up humanitarian innovation, to think through what innovation means in the context of refugee protection, and how it can link to the initiative, aspirations, and entrepreneurship of refugees themselves, rather than being a top-down, imposed idea of innovation that goes for cookie-cutter solutions out there. We want to work from particular field challenges and the experiences and context of refugees themselves. To do that, our second goal is starting with a particular focus. You have to start somewhere. The humanitarian world is enormous, and we've chosen to begin with refugee livelihoods, an area which is challenging in innovation because it lies nested between all of these other areas. Solar power, for instance, can create livelihoods opportunities. Health initiatives and innovation can contribute to people's ability to earn livelihoods. It's a highly nested area, and that creates a number of challenges. But it's the starting point for our work. I should say something about how we think of innovation. This is really crucial. Innovation is a buzzword. We often think of it as novelty or synonymous with invention. But we don't see it that way. We see it as taking something that may already exist in another context, applying it to a new context, and appropriately adapting it. And when we talk about innovation, we're not thinking about a quality of products or processes. We're thinking about a methodology for change, a methodology that has, in our eyes, and drawing upon most of the innovation literature, 4 basic steps. And those steps are non-linear, the arrows go in different directions, but they work around 4 steps of firstly, specifying a problem. Secondly, looking outwards to find inspiration in solutions that may already exist. Thirdly, piloting some of those solutions, testing whether they work in the particular context we're looking at, and where appropriate, fourthly, moving to scaling. And what's crucial about that innovation process is the substance of each of those stages. The relationship between them may be very different in practice and need to be very different depending on different contexts. But it gives us a way of thinking about how we can move from old ways of doing things to possible new ways and look to pilot alternative ways of doing things. There are 2 areas in refugee protection where we see innovation as particularly relevant: the emergency phase and so-called protracted refugee situations. Very simplistically, humanitarianism divides into a range of subsectors. You can think of it as comprising shelter, wash, health, nutrition, internet and communications technology. In all of those areas, there are wide numbers of people who have skills, ideas, solutions that may be untapped and that may offer a potential source of inspiration to be drawn in to that second stage of the innovation process. But most crucially, in terms of what we're looking at, is the second area of protracted refugee situations, where historically many people get stuck in an intractable state of limbo, sometimes for 5, 10, 15 years in refugee camps, without freedom of movement and without the right to work. And there are areas where innovation can play a role in contexts not only where refugees are confined to camps for long periods of time, like the Dadaab camps in northern Kenya, or where there are emerging camp populations, as in the Dolo camps in Ethiopia, but also in settlements, in urban areas, where people have been present for a long time. And there are areas where UNHCR Innovation is starting to think about the contribution that innovation can make in this area. As Olivier will say later, UNHCR Innovation has split its areas of work into 3 basic pillars that it calls live, link, and work. Live referring to emergency response, link to internet and communications technology, and work to this livelihoods area that we're picking up on. And we see the livelihoods response as central to transforming protracted refugee situations. That there's potential for micro work and data outsourcing that needs to be thought about and critically assessed, for skills training, for locally sourced materials, for small businesses, and for piloting new products. Of course, one of the big challenges in this context is the regulatory and political environment that can't be changed overnight. But we think there are areas where innovation in the private sector, formal or informal, may still have a role. In that context of protracted refugee situations, there's a long history of attempts by the international community to move and transition from a humanitarian response to a developmental response. To say, rather than just supporting people's basic needs, we can conceive of them as subjects of development and integrate development assistance for national host populations alongside refugee communities. And that's been based on a series of attempts to facilitate refugees' self-reliance or their local integration towards a path to citizenship alongside the national citizens of the country. But historically, those kinds of approaches have often had severe limitations. They've been limited by the willingness of the host state to move towards integrating non-citizens in their national development plans. And they've been limited by an unwillingness of donor states to contribute development resources to an area traditionally seen as humanitarian. So in a way, one of the questions we want to pose is, in this context, can innovation in the private sector be a potential missing link?
My name is Nao, and in the first session, Alex gave us a kind of very good framework. But now we are coming to Uganda, and we do the relatively concrete case studies. And as Alex described on the Humanitarian Innovation Project, we have two complementary research tracks. One is looking inward, the other one is looking outward. And the purpose of this project is to conduct research on the role of technology and innovation and the private sector, and actually to inform humanitarian practice through this research. So first thing we have to do is that we have to understand how refugees themselves are using technology or innovative ideas, and how they are engaging with the private sector on the ground by collecting empirical data from the fieldwork. And after that, we can start thinking about how refugees' skills or agency or creativity can be complemented by certain types of untapped approaches or ideas which might exist outside the humanitarian arena. During my research, also I came across a few examples of social enterprises which are trying to assist refugees' livelihoods. And today I just like to mention two examples. And let me start with the technology for tomorrow. And I'm not going into details because Dr. Moses Musazi, the founder, is here, and he's describing about what he's doing in the section. But just very briefly, Technology for Tomorrow hires or employs refugees to produce this environmentally friendly sanitary pad, and it's called Macapads. And the UNHCR purchases these Macapads from Technology for Tomorrow and distribute them in the settlements in Uganda. Previously, these sanitary pads were imported from abroad to Uganda. But by using locally available materials, T4T has managed to develop this biodegradable sanitary pads at a much lower cost, and also created employment for refugees. And the company is aspiring to make this Macapad as a commercially viable product, and to expand, to explore the market in order to scale up this business. Second example I'd like to address today is that the work done by Green Bioenergy, and luckily today we have a Vincent, as a founder today. And the GB is a private company which assists income-generating means of urban poor people through the production of briquettes. So GB trains participants how to collect organic waste and how to carbonize them into these briquettes. Okay. And GB purchases these briquettes from participants and sell them to the commercial retailers for profit. And at this stage, refugees are not main beneficiaries of GEB, but this model can be applied in refugee in the capital and other settlement contexts. In this project, and especially with respect to this topic, what we are aiming is that to develop a much more like a nuanced understanding of refugee livelihood in relation to the private sector. Okay. And let me just show you how complicated this topic is using this diagram. This is just a work in progress, so it's not really complete. But as the case of Uganda shows, there are two directions refugee can engage with the private sector. First of all, refugees and the private sector as entrepreneurs or maybe as employees. Also, private sector can also intervene in refugees' economic life. In many cases, it's either beneficiary or customers, but technology for tomorrow's case, they're intervening by employing refugees as employees. And when we look at the private sector and refugees, they are also quite complicated. Refugees are significantly diverse. As I showed today, there are different economic levels, and of course, age and gender also differentiate refugees' characteristics. And more importantly, refugees are living in a very different environment. It can be camp or non-camp setting, and urban and rural area. And in some cases, there are very restrictive regulating environments, some are less restrictive. And also even time framework, like a length of exile, whether it's an emergency case or protracted refugee situation. So these are all the barriers. Probably there are more. Now, importantly, when we look at the private sector, this is not monolithic at all. As Alex mentioned, from local level up until global, and also formal and informal, importantly. And also their motives are different. Today I showed some examples of green bioenergy and also technology for tomorrow. They are more like probably social enterprise, but of course they are for-profit businesses. And I'm sure there are many more variables. And to make matter more complicated, there are other actors which can shape the relationship between these two. For example, host government, host communities. And probably refugees, agencies and donors. And yes. Okay, the reason I showed this diagram is that when we discuss refugees' livelihoods and their engagement with the private sector, there are so many different ways to approach that. And what we are seeking is to develop a much more nuanced understanding of this complexity between private sector and refugees. And Uganda is just a tip of, like iceberg of this complexity. So for our future, in terms of next step, what we are thinking is that as I suggested in the concept note, we are thinking about developing comparative case studies reflecting these diversities and come up with more like better understanding under what conditions the private sector can make contribution to the livelihoods. That is our future goal.
The work that I've been doing on our Humanitarian Innovation Solutions database. So using these concepts, I've kind of started to try and build a picture, just as Now has, looking inwards at refugee livelihoods. I'm trying to look at examples of innovations or perceived innovations that could take us to this kind of new, more sustainable way of working for the sector. So I've taken examples from a broad variety of sectors, from not only the humanitarian sector, but from the private sector, academia, and also some of Now's examples are also in the database. So the intention of this was just to, like I said, build up this picture, where are the examples of where we are moving to a more sustainable approach, where are the barriers and challenges, and what potential actually might solutions have for refugee protection. So there's lots of examples in the database that haven't necessarily come directly from a refugee context, but as we've spoken about quite a lot this morning, that there are situations in poor communities or host communities where solutions could have relevance. So the database, as Alex already mentioned, is over there if you want to have a look at it later on and give some comments. In the database, we've mapped out, there's around 100 examples so far, of different types of product, processes, paradigm, and position innovations. And we've talked about what potential each innovation has for the refugees, for refugee protection. In order to just demonstrate what the kind of picture is looking like so far and what's been emerging, I just wanted to explain briefly some of the key areas that seem to be kind of standing out. So these circles just represent kind of clusters of types of innovations, and it's not at all, it doesn't at all cover everything, but these do cover the things that I've been noticing more than others, and I'll talk a bit about maybe why that might be in the end. First of all, in the top right hand corner, I just said other sources. So there are lots of other sources of online databases, wikis, blogs, and repositories of sharing information. So LNAP have been doing case studies on different examples of innovations in the humanitarian sector. There's also a great blog called AfroGadget, where it's kind of lots of cool, mostly product innovations, but innovations blogged by Africans. So yeah, there's lots of other sources of databases out there. So I haven't repeated the information from those in the database, but I think it's important just to flag out that there are other sources of information quite spread out. The key areas, so we've got ICT and mobile technology. There's obviously a lot of examples of kind of product innovations again in ICT and mobile technology, especially in Kenya, where there's a kind of booming connectivity market. Bottom of the pyramid markets, so as Alex mentioned earlier, companies, maybe probably big global private sectors, accessing bottom of the market, bottom of the pyramid market, sorry. So there's quite a few examples of those where NGOs have either engaged and tried to kind of create jobs through global supply chains, or big private companies have kind of engaged with their local supply chains themselves. Renewable energy, another, I guess, quite it's like a common theme at the moment, that there are lots of renewable energy solutions for low-income countries. Lots of product innovations, I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. Quite a lot of example innovations that come out of humanitarian responses and social enterprise. This bottom one, very quickly, is enabling innovation. So just like there are lots of examples of databases that are capturing example kind of products, processes, there's also examples of competitions like the Humanitarian Innovation Fund and innovation hubs and communities and networks, whether they're online or real space, that enable innovation. So kind of creating a space where people can test their ideas, come up with new solutions. I wanted to give you one example, some of you may have come across it already, which is a charity initially called Cola Life, and they kind of piggyback on the Coca-Cola supply chain in order to get basic healthcare products to remote locations. So I guess the concept is that Coca-Cola gets everywhere and their supply chain is amazingly rigorous, so therefore why shouldn't we use the kind of space and the crates to piggyback and get a more diverse product range to those remote markets. So it started off as a very small charity, so it is still a charity, but it's using a kind of business, social enterprise model in order to try and become sustainable. And it started very small, and it's got a pilot in Zambia. And so the pilot, they've got these 8 pods which sit in Coca-Cola crates. So the 8 pods at the moment are made internationally and then put into the supply chain later on. And they contain oral rehydration salts, paracetamol, very basic healthcare over-the-counter treatments. So the charity has been working with local traders to train on what these products can do, how they can sell them in their market, and how to market them. So they're really at the piloting stage. They're working with some universities on how to pilot, looking at the evaluation of that and how they can scale up the idea. And they're also looking at, in terms of scalability, scaling the kind of innovation, they're looking at local production of these aid pods. And also another leveraging kind of technique, they're looking at different types of products that could be put in. So in terms of potential, this at the moment isn't necessarily a refugee example, but it does have potential. This kind of idea or models and lessons we can learn from that could be taken into a refugee context. I just wanted to, the last point on social enterprise is that, as I mentioned, there are different kind of models and charities or individuals or rewards that are given to start-up social enterprises, and the investment varies, even though the kind of model or the solution might be the same, which I find quite interesting. So in the Cola Life example, they're still relying on charitable donations in order to get to the point where they're being sustainable, so they don't necessarily have a kind of main investment to start. And I think there's lots of the social enterprise examples we've had. There seems to be a struggle to kind of being sustainable, economically sustainable. And so I think that's linked to the impact. So measuring social impact doesn't seem to be a kind of very well understood or well practiced area. And that around defining social impact and looking at how those models themselves could be more sustainable or use the kind of business approach that they're trying could be an interesting area for us to look at in more detail.
There is, we took this picture very, for us, there's a lot of meaning on this picture, because this is the symptomatic activity that UNHCR with our partners will do. It's called time occupation. For people to not totally becoming totally crazy, you do something with your hands, or you have a feeling and you occupy yourself with something. But actually, have we applied the private sector methodology to understand what the market force is? Have we done market surveys? Have we done a supply chain analysis in country? Very, very rarely. Actually, Gaila can testify. It would be maybe let my hand. Okay, one, twice. Anyway, it's not something we do naturally. But we have to embrace the private sector's ability to do that for a living, and then apply this kind of rules to ourselves. And this is the future if it actually was sold in a proper supply chain with IKEA, for instance. Where we're developing a project where they will sell this kind of stuff that actually is driven by demand, not by charity or philanthropy. It is demand driven. The quality goes down, the whole thing collapses, and you lose your market. And the second big element is the perception of looking at refugees as the clients, not the beneficiary or the caseload, as we refer awfully to sometimes. They are actually agents of their own development, and they are looking at producing goods, and this Macapad is a perfect example. It's a wonderful illustration of how livelihood can be done in a very holistic way, and actually has a bottom line, which is making money by doing good. And actually the biggest purchaser, the biggest client here is us, the UNHCR procurement machine. Huge. We spent $400 million of procuring goods last year. It's a big, big amount of money. Not huge, but big. Significant enough to create some appetite for producing this kind of goods in country, in camps. But again, you have to look at this in a totally different way, and moving away from just assistance to empowerment and business to business.
And I'm sure many of you saw this. These are homes being made out of plastic bottles, and they fill them up with sand. So actually they make them bulletproof when they're packed with sand. They're way stronger than cement. It's eco-friendly, it's cooler in there because of the way it's built. It's actually pretty big, fits an entire family of 10 is what I've heard. 700-800 bottles make one house. So there's, and this is locals making it for locals. So it's not, and outside entities coming in and saying, we're going to do this. They came up with the idea from all of the waste from the plastic bottles. And we've all been I'm from Nicaragua, but I go to Africa, and clearly I see the bottles in some of the beaches I'll go to, just floating. And so this is a really good way to also clean up the area. And so just a really interesting, innovative idea. They use cement inside, but just to pack it, but it's really just all the bottles. And that's that whole house right there. That's 700-800 bottles right there. And that you can employ hundreds of people doing this. An entire town is being built on these bottles right now in Nigeria, in Yelwa.